Hi everyone, so this is the video where we're going to be discussing the poem El Olvido. You should have already watched the film Battle of the Breaths and watched the video where I discussed that. And then if you haven't, go back and watch those, and then you can look at this. You will need to post on the discussion board your responses to both Battle of the Breaths and El Olvido. So we want to go through and talk about this. Again, in the uh, video about Battle of the Breaths, I mentioned the fact that I wanted to start with a film because sometimes that's easier for us to understand what's going on through the visual images, and then we can try and translate that over to what we have going on here in a poem. The poem might be more difficult for us to understand. Because we have to think about what those words mean, but the visual images, that's something we're more used to. But so take some of the ideas we had from there, and then we can move them over to here and looking at the poem. You'll see that in this poem, there's a copy of this poem in your folder, in the Part 1 folder, and I've highlighted sections of the sections here that are important. I've done what's called annotated places. So I say here El Olvido, which is the title of the poem. I have an asterisk there, the little mark there, and it says down at the bottom, it is a Spanish word meaning the forgotten or oblivion. So if you didn't know that, now you've got that information there. And then you can see over here where I've annotated there, I've put a little note there, and so you can it tells you if you don't know a word, make sure to look it up. So if I haven't provided the information in the poem, then you please go ahead and look it up, because you have to know what all the words mean in order to understand the poem. And this kind of annotation that I've done here through a lot of these places, I've just asked questions. And that's something that you want to do when you're looking at a poem. You want to go through and say, wait a minute, why is this being done? You'll notice that's something that I did when we were looking at Battle of the Breaths. When I was talking about that, I said, you know, why are we starting in India? Why do we have this American flag here? Why do we have these girls putting on high heels and lipstick and going out for a night on the town, but an image of a young woman saying to be quiet, keep this a secret? What is all that about? And so I just asking those questions, because a lot of times if you can ask the questions, once you can ask the questions, that's the first step to being able to answer them. When you look at a poem, you should not necessarily understand everything. I don't understand everything when I look at many poems. Okay, it's my job is to talk about them, but I'll read a poem and I'll go, I don't know what's going on here. But what I know how to do is ask questions. I'll look at something and say, why this, why that? And then slowly, as I begin to try and answer the questions, I begin to get a sense of how I'm supposed to be thinking about the poem as a whole. So let me go through, and first I'm going to read the poem. You can follow along, and then I want to talk about some of the annotations, and then we'll see how this poem potentially relates to Battle of the Breaths. So, El Olvido by Judith Ortiz Cofer. It is a dangerous thing to forget the climate of your birthplace, to choke out the voices of dead relatives when in dreams they call you by your secret name. It is dangerous to spurn the clothes you were born to wear for the sake of fashion, dangerous to use weapons and sharp instruments you are not familiar with, dangerous to disdain the plaster saints before which your mother kneels, praying with embarrassing fervor that you survive in the place you have chosen to live, a bare cold room with no pictures on the walls, a forgetting place where she fears you will die of loneliness and exposure. Jesus Maria y Jose, she says, El Olvido is a dangerous thing. So, first off, we looked at the title here. As we said, Olvido, Spanish word meaning forgotten or oblivion. One of the first things maybe to ask is, why is it in Spanish? Usually, you know, most of this poem is in English. Most of it is in English. Why do we have one word, the title, in Spanish? One of the things to keep in mind, titles are always incredibly important. Going back to Battle of the Breaths, there's a battle going on there. What battle? Who's battling who? Is this two things battling each other? Maybe it's an internal battle. But El Olvido is, if that's going to be the title, it's going to be something rather important. The fact that it's in Spanish is going to be potentially important. And it says here, the forgotten, right? Well, who's forgotten here? Well, let's just file that away and think about that. It also can mean oblivion. If something is in oblivion, it's kind of gone off into nothingness, a place where it can never be found. We blow things to oblivion, right? They don't exist anymore. So let's kind of file that away and see what that suggests. So then it says in here, it is a dangerous thing to forget the climate of your birthplace. And you'll see the comment that I have over here. It also pops up, I think, if I hover over here. Maybe not. But over here I say, dangerous in what way? Right? So it says it's a dangerous thing to forget the climate of your birthplace. Is it dangerous to forget what the weather was like where you were born? And I asked the question there, will you be injured or die if that happens? That doesn't necessarily mean that it's dangerous. Will you be injured or die? And then I say in there also, is this an exaggeration? Maybe it's not dangerous in the way that we really think about danger, and something bad might happen to your body, but maybe it's a different kind of danger. We might think about what that might be. And then it says in here, is it a dangerous thing to forget the climate of your birthplace? And you look at the note up above there, I say, this relates back to the title, so it must be important. Again, if the title is important, and the title is The Forgotten, and then suddenly, 2 lines in, we're already using the word forgot, maybe we should think about the relationship between those. Remember in Battle of the Breaths, when we're talking about that oil and water, it keeps showing up. And we're saying if that keeps showing up, maybe that's important. So maybe this idea of forgetting is going to be important as well. So it's dangerous to forget the climate of your birthplace. And again, I'm asking that question. Can it be dangerous to forget that? If you don't live there anymore, how does that affect you, right? I live thousands of miles away. It can't really affect me if I forget what it's like there. Maybe if you lived there and you forgot there are hurricanes that come through, right? That could be dangerous. But if you don't live there anymore, it's not really dangerous, right? Are we necessarily speaking literally? Do these things mean what they seem to mean on the surface, or are we suggesting something else? And what is it that we might be suggesting? It is dangerous to choke out the voices of dead relatives when in dreams they call you by your secret name. How can you hear the voices of dead relatives? Well, maybe in dreams it says that, so maybe that makes some sense. But why would you ever bother to listen to the voices of your dead relatives? What do they know about what's going on with your life? They're dead. They're not involved with what you're doing right now. So why should we listen to the voices of our dead relatives, the people that came before us? Again, an interesting question to ask. When in dreams they call you by your secret name, what name are we talking about? Why is it a secret? Your name usually is something you tell anybody, right? You fill out forms and everything like that, and everybody knows your name. Why would you have a secret name? And why would your dead relatives know that secret name? And then it says, it is dangerous to spurn. Down here it says reject with disdain. And by the way, disdain is a word that's down here. And disdain is the feeling that something, someone or something is unworthy of one's consideration or respect. So it is dangerous to spurn the clothes you were born to wear for the sake of fashion. So why might we be born to wear certain clothes? What happens with that? It is dangerous to use weapons and sharp instruments you are not familiar with. On one level, that seems very clear. It is dangerous to use those kind of things. But how does that relate to the poem? Are we using dangerous weapons in this poem? Maybe we aren't actually talking about weapons. Maybe it suggests something else. Dangerous to disdain, as we said, that's to feel that something is unworthy of one's consideration or respect. It is dangerous to disdain the plaster saints before which your mother kneels, praying with embarrassing fervor. Fervor, as it says here, is an intense or passionate feeling. And I ask this question, who's this embarrassing to? Why, right? Is it embarrassing to the mother that she's praying in this intense and passionate way? Or maybe it's embarrassing to the child to see the mother praying in this way. It is dangerous to disdain the plaster saints before which your mother kneels, praying with embarrassing fervor that you survive in the place you have chosen to live, right? Where has this person chosen to live? Well, maybe it's a place very different from their birthplace that we said at the beginning, right? That might make sense. And maybe that's why this person might be forgetting the birthplace, because they've chosen to live someplace else. Um, uh, she is praying that you survive in the place you have chosen to live, a bare, cold room with no pictures on the walls, a forgetting place. Forgetting. We've been talking about forgetting got a couple mentions of forgetting through here. A forgetting place where she fears you will die of loneliness and exposure. Exposure is, I asked the question here, do people die of loneliness? Not really, not directly. And I say exposure comes from being outside, and the speaker is in a room. So is there a real chance that somebody's going to die here of loneliness and exposure? Are they really going to die? Physically, are they going to die? That goes back to this idea of dangerous. How dangerous is this, right? Jesus Maria y Jose, she says, El Olvido is a dangerous thing. So forgetting where your birthplace, which could be where you come from, might be dangerous, right? These relatives, right? They are might be the place, the people from that birthplace, right? And the people in that birthplace might know a secret name, right? A special name that you get called by that other people from who are not from your birthplace might not know. The clothes that you were born to wear, right? Do you wear certain clothes? Do the people where you come from wear certain clothes that you don't wear when you move someplace else? Remember the theme of this course, new immigrants to the United States. Well, it's one of the themes. So to what extent might we be talking about some of these things, right? It's dangerous to forget where you came from. The mother hoping you survive in this place you have chosen to live, this very different place where she fears you will die of loneliness and exposure, right? Because you've moved away from your birthplace and you've forgotten all that. Look at the poem again. Again, you've got a copy in the folder, in the part one folder. You can look at it again, think about it, and then you can respond to the discussion board. And again, in the discussion board, I want you to think about the similarities and differences between what we get in Battle of the Breaths and what we get here in Olvido, because I think that there are some similarities. What does it mean about, people coming from one place to another place and how we think about that? So you'll post an initial response, and then once you post that initial response, you'll be able to see what other students have done. If they posted anything yet, you may have to come back. But you'll come back and look at their responses and then comment on that. So for a total, you'll do 100 words on this, 75 for the initial response and 25 for responding to to what another student has said. As always, if you have any questions, any concerns about anything, make sure to email them to me. Please let me know if you have any questions. If you're completely confused, shoot me an email. It's something we can have a discussion about. But go ahead and work on that, and then when you're done with this, you can move on to part 2.